Okay, welcome to episode number 8 of SDRs on Mars, the show where we talk to salespeople about being salespeople. So my guest this week is Scott Berty. And Scott, I'll let you take it away for a second.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy. And I guess to introduce myself, I'll say that right now, I just recently started a new role as the growth manager at RightMetric. RightMetric is essentially a searchable library of data-backed case studies for marketing leaders and their teams. Helps them make quicker strategic decision-making and really back everything they're doing in there with data. Past that, most recently, I was the chief growth officer at TrueFan, where I still hold an advisory position right now and helped start that company back in the late stages of 2017. So definitely just came out, I guess, of graduating my first startup experience, if you will, particularly like the tech startup experience. So that was pretty interesting and learned a lot when it came to sales, both for B2B and to B2C. I'm also an advisor to Quarter4, an AI company. And I guess like going backwards a little bit to speak about my B2B history. When I first got started in B2B, I was working probably would have been a few jobs ago, just 2 or 3, with you at Robert Half Technology. So that was where I first got my start into B2B sales. And yeah, I was an account executive working with you on the technology side.
Love it. Yeah, that was back in the day. We're all getting our chops.
It was. It was indeed, yeah. It was a good time though, and great training.
Cool. Okay, so you're working with, you said it was RightMetric right now?
Yeah, RightMetric is the name.
Okay, and so as a chief growth officer, what do you do?
I should say right off the bat, I was a chief growth officer at TrueFan, but I've stepped into a role not as like an officer in this company, just starting off as like a growth manager. With that said, it's pretty much a similar sort of scope on what I was doing. I guess like, I was more on the leadership side when I was working with TrueFan because I helped start the company, and probably would have started more, I guess it was our head of sales before that started to split into a little bit of marketing, a little bit of product. But I think growth is ultimately, particularly like earlier stage B2B companies, because I think that term can be mixed across the board and definitely like into the marketing category pretty significantly. But for me, it's really a mix of some marketing ops and I guess a little bit of that demand gen, lead gen side of marketing, combined with all the stuff that kind of factors into managing an outbound vendor right now who does our outreach program, doing a little bit of outbound and prospecting myself, as every salesperson really does, especially at earlier, smaller companies. And then managing the meeting process, actually managing the sales playbook, and really just starting to put that together now because they're sort of at a stage as a company where they're proven the sort of productized offering that they have, and they've had a lot of experience providing research, which is kind of what they do, data back research for companies out there. But their sales org, so to speak, anybody listening to this who is in sales would kind of know that term, is pretty much nothing. It doesn't exist at this point. So in large part, that's why I was brought in, was to help build that, sort of lead it off of the bat and kind of be that like first AE slash, first marketer slash first outbound sales rep, like all of the above, combined
just doing
with,
it all.
work. Yeah, but like, you work pretty closely with the CEO and the COO, who are kind of the like CEO has been doing the sales and the customer work up till now, and then the COO is more like the ops and marketing ops type guy. And so it's like a fun role because I get to learn from those guys. They learn from me a little bit, constantly getting feedback, and just building a sales organization, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Okay, cool. And whereabouts is RightMetric located or headquartered out of?
They are Canadian, represent, and they're based out of Vancouver. So I actually work remotely out of Ottawa right now, and calling you right now from my classic office / one of the rooms in this apartment.
Nice. I like it. Have you worked remotely with other roles before?
Yeah, now I've been kind of forced to, like I'm sure many people you've had on the show, due to COVID. But it wasn't really something I had a ton of experience with until that began. I was partially remote for periods of time in the early phases of TrueFan. So that was a tech startup, as I mentioned, I helped found back in 2017. And like, when I say like we founded the idea, then it was very much just an idea. Is like, I think it would have been December of 2017. We like incorporated as a company, you know what I mean? The CEO and the initial founder did that. And we kind of got underway from what was very much just like ideas and documentation about this thing. And it took about, I'd say 7 to 9 months to get funding for what was still, well, I shouldn't say that. It took about 3 or 4 months to get like $20K through the door to start building a product, but not the type of funding that was like paying anybody. So like the three of us were just still working remote at that point. Somebody was in like, I think the co-founder was going to Stanford. Our CEO and founder was like speaking all over the place. So he was still traveling. This was pre-COVID, right? And then I was in Ottawa at the time. So yeah, we were working remotely at that point. The only time where we finally centralized for a few years up until COVID was after we got like a proper round of funding.
Right.
And we could like pay one another. So like at that point I went and worked in Vancouver for a little bit. And yeah, kind of followed them around for a little while. So
nice. My brother's out in Vancouver, and I feel like I say this all the time, and I need to go see him.
Yes, yeah. I mean, like, I actually have that extra bit of urgency or motivation, if you will, now to go to Vancouver because I'm working for a company that's based there, and like they're fully remote now, but they do have that sort of office space or communal spot that people can work out of. So like I'm extra juiced in the opportunity to like go there and like have a nice view of the mountains and like go work from that office for a week or two.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. Okay. So, the company that you're working for right now, it's TrueMetric. Is that what it is?
RightMetric is current. Yeah. That's the current.
Okay. So, tell me a little bit, like you kind of gave me an overview of sort of like what you guys sell, like more case study, data driven, examples. So like, I want to talk a little bit more about it. I want to know who you're targeting to sort of, create that conversation.
So they've got a pretty, I guess it's like an early stage ideal client profile, is what I'd call it, with like a pretty batch group of personas, and which is like good because, I'm not coming in blind. I don't know. I know who our customer is. It's not like they don't have that information for me. But I think going like a layer deeper is one of my goals, as I continue to kind of refine a sales playbook, is like really delving into those personas a little bit and grouping them up a little, because there are different types. And right now, I would say we predominantly sell to marketing leaders and their teams. And the reason I say that is like, that's who the sort of productized version of this research, I should say, was intended for. So that could consist of like selling to teams. And I say this in terms of like digital marketing managers is probably like the most straightforward title that has come up in the past. But like marketing managers, senior analysts, senior digital analysts and those types of people, like, I think if I point back on like the Challenger sale as like a great B2B resource or reference point, like one of the things that they talk about in there is the importance of widespread buy-in at organizations. And so although, yes, we do target like marketing leaders, and that could be, head of brand, head of communications and brand, head of marketing, head of digital, even just directors of digital and some of those roles. I think it can serve us as a business well, but also like businesses out there pretty well to not get too stuck on like, hey, we strictly target leaders because that's like who signs off on the decision. I think we start off like right now in terms of my own outreach efforts, I'm starting off with like a category of marketing leaders, category of kind of mid-level managers, if you will, like most likely people who are a little bit tactical, but also managing a team of maybe tacticians in the bigger consumer companies. And then, there's also this kind of split side of who we would sell to, which is more of like an insights manager or somebody who's maybe the head of analytics or director of analytics, because since it's data backed, certain consumer brands, and we really target 100 person plus consumer brands, they may operate in a way where like a lot of the decisions or data and insights that get factored into decision making, even for a department like marketing, which can be massive, actually still runs through like a BI or an analytics style department, even a team. that's within that marketing team.
That is interesting. There's definitely multiple teams and a lot of organizations that can take advantage of that, right?
And then, yeah, it is. I mean, like, I think that's part of the game, is just trying to build that widespread buy-in and connect a network of like stakeholders, if you will. Like, of course, it's easier said than done. But most likely, like, there's going to be people at different levels or in different teams that are going to have some sort of say on this type of decision getting made, right? So, because it is a solution sale, like ACV is, in the range of between, let's say, 45 to 60 CAD, K, that is.
Yeah.
So 45,000 to 60,000 CAD. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So tell me a little bit about this discovery process. How do you kind of figure out if you're talking to the right person?
It's a great question. As I'm sure many people hit you up with many different responses, but it probably all falls down to the same thing is, we have a funnel and we're trying to qualify sort of the right buyers into that funnel. We're making some changes at the moment, or RightMetric is about to launch some changes soon enough that will really assist with our inbound funnel strategy and kind of drawing more buyers and potential like marketing, both advocates and evangelists, into our sort of network of contacts, if you will. Going to try a free strategy for a period of time with like a portion of the insights. But in terms of my efforts to go about discovery calls, I mean, right now I haven't done too many. Like, I've only been with them for the last 3-4 weeks, so I haven't even gotten to like the thick of my own calls. But I am currently, behind the scenes putting together a playbook, and so like a structured way of actually approaching these discovery calls. So what I can speak on is maybe like what we're going to be doing that's different than what they're doing now, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So because the CEO, who definitely doesn't have a track record of B2B sales, has been in that sort of sales slot, pushing the company forward and like bringing in new revenue for their entire existence now, like the last 2.5 or so years. He's done well, but he knows that like they're sort of lacking systems, right, if you will. And he still takes a lot of his notes in Apple Notes and like things like that. So like the first little bit of work that I'm doing is really, now that they've already implemented HubSpot as part of their process of doing outreach with a vendor, training him on HubSpot and just kind of getting, the core sort of like objects that we're using, the core properties and things that we want to be recording, for lack of a better term, like as an activity in HubSpot, right? And so like kind of going through that core framework of like, hey, here's sort of the non-negotiables or like key properties that we're filling out, and here's how you go about creating a deal, tracking call types, and for discovery calls as an example, like here's the sort of questions you want to answer, having that sort of information done up. And then on the playbook side, like having this in a more clear fashion to understand that like, hey, what's the purpose of a discovery call? What are sort of the requirements when we're coming out of that to be moving on and like to essentially to have next steps on the table, right? Like something as simple as BANT, like that budget, authority. Everybody knows where I'm going with that one. And then the actions that need to be taken as we move along. And of course the questions that are typically asked, and recording those answers all inside of HubSpot. So like setting up that foundation, having a bit more of like a playbook and a standard operating procedure, that's what we're really focused on. And I think taking that a step further, like I mentioned the Challenger just earlier. The Challenger has like a really great concept, I think, or framework that's built around discovery and
Sorry,
sort of
I just want to, just for a second, what is the Challenger?
The Challenger sale. I call it the Challenger, but I think initially I said the Challenger sale. It's a book.
Okay.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't read it. It's going on my reading list now.
Yeah. That's one you should actually like drop in the show notes. If people watching this haven't read the Challenger sale, but you're in B2B sales or want to be, that's like I'd say that's top 3 for most people that I know. So that's not just a biased look, but like it would be my number 1 for sure.
Okay.
Anyways, where I was going with that and the whole discovery theory is just like removing the whole selling yourself approach, right? Or like what you do and that whole differentiation approach of like product or brand or service, like we outdo our competitors through service, or like, those kind of things that can boil you down to like having to compete on price.
Right.
It really talks about like that whole buyer's experience as one of the things that earns loyalty the most. And because of that, how like a lot of buyers in the B2B space are really looking for insights that they didn't know were out there, and like for you to teach them something along the way. And so they offer up this kind of term of commercial teaching that's I'll just kind of stop it there, but that's super valuable when it comes to thinking about like how you might want to position yourself before getting to the point of like your demo, or actually like going over, here's what we offer, like here's what we do, because you really want to be able to frame that as a solution to like, one, those problems needs that you've uncovered during that process of discovery, but two, like that ability to almost like frame problems in a way that they didn't currently look at them, or like get them to think about their business differently. It's truly like challenging them with the information that you present them at a discovery stage.
Right. Cool. Okay. I like that. And so now, looking at this and actually creating sort of that playbook, are you like addressing objections in that playbook, or like is that sort of more of the feedback that you need?
That we're definitely going through the process of looking at like the objections and how to overcome those objections as well. Basically just trying to group object for those objections that we typically receive, how to overcome them, obviously, and kind of, the goal of where to take the conversation. I think the most common when you're chasing marketers that have typically a pretty solid tenure under them, and like they work for a massive consumer brand that no doubt has its internal politics all running around, and like these are busy people. Naturally, they have a lot to do. The last thing they typically have is time. So like,
right,
especially when you're coming off as like cold outreach, the most obvious thing you're going to face is like, I really don't have time for this, or this isn't something that like we have the time or need to implement like right now. Right?
Okay.
And I think that like the most interesting way of like almost positioning yourself proactively or then retroactively to overcome that is like, look, everybody we sell to, and like the fact that I have you on the phone right now proves that like you can make a little bit of time, but all of our customers have no time to begin with. And that's kind of part of the reason that we're trying to give them something that's more proactive to open up more time.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like the problem that you're telling me is like, it's part of the problem that we help you solve.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, we know that you don't have time. And like, I think when you're starting the process of outreach, almost like if you're using that as the point of, hey, like how to speak to your buyer off the bat, or especially if you're calling them right off the bat, like address that one pain point that they have no matter what, and that they're probably going to throw at you as an objection right off the bat. So it's like, yeah, you're right, I have no time. Like if you just said like, hey, hey, John, I know like most of our customers and the marketing leaders we speak with, you probably have no time to hear from me right now, but I do want to tell you about how we're helping marketing leaders and their teams earn back more of their time through their planning, their execution of their marketing strategies. Like something like, simple like that. It's like, hey, Scott, you're right, I don't have any time, but maybe you can call me back like at this time. Whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. What do you feel like is your most useful sales tool in your tool belt?
Kind of be tough not to say HubSpot for me, just because it's still early for us. But in this role and in past roles, I've used HubSpot a fair bit now, and it's kind of an affordable CRM / marketing automation solution, and so it can really help with like easing up the burden of certain manual tasks. But also just kind of giving me the ability to do a bit of that like marketing ops related work as well in one environment that orients well with sales. I don't know. What's yours, Jeremy? I'm curious.
I've been playing with Zoho Recruit for lumps and recruiting, and it's the same thing. Like it's a CRM. I know it's really good. It's interesting because other recruiting CRMs, it's already got that functionality, but I'm like, how can I use it to its fullest, right?
Yeah, Zoho has a lot of good, like in a past role, I used Zoho for finance and like their books application.
Yeah.
That was pretty helpful. Like it integrates really well across the board with other apps and stuff. So
they have a decent amount of like different Zoho like products and platforms. So I'm specifically using
within
Zoho
their suite.
Recruit. Yeah. which is like the parsing's pretty good. It works pretty good, but I'm still figuring out how to like track activity properly and like log it properly and set follow-ups and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah.
That's the constant iteration, right? Like always iterating that process.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now you've seen sales in a few different organizations, and you've been part of, I think, a little more, that strategic sort of process behind, driving sales. So why do you like sales so much?
I love that question. It's super relevant to me right now because I've had to think about it before taking this role, and essentially in between when I started this role about a little over 3 weeks back, and where I pulled back from my full-time tenure at TrueFan to just kind of sit in that advisory role. I had about 2.5 months, and like my goal was basically to just kind of reset a little bit. Like I was a little bit burnt out from that 3 years of startup and like just constant overcoming challenges and working a little bit too much. So resetting from that, but also thinking about like, I was in this weird inflection point. Like, do I want to pursue sales, kind of as I make this next step in my career, and continue, I guess, putting like my eggs into that basket, because that's really what I've done for most of my career now. Or do I want to take this opportunity to kind of delve into more of a marketing direction? So for me, I did decide on sales, although I do enjoy like marketing strategy, digital strategy, on the consumer brand side, where you get to really implement those types of things on a regular basis. And the reason I decided on B2B sales and, a little bit at the same time B2B marketing is I feel as though like as a 5 to 10 year goal, if I can be successful in this industry and like really help companies scale, one like RightMetric that is kind of in that growth phase right now and has already reached profitability, then I'll not only like, be successful enough on the compensation side myself, but I think that those learnings that come from those experiences will really help me further advise and potentially start my own businesses. So like whether it's advising future tech startups and just kind of getting involved as a potential investor or advisor, or 5-10 years down the road, kind of starting my own business. I think sales in large part, especially if you're looking at like SaaS as an opportunity to be an entrepreneur eventually, like sales is such a core. I mean, it's either like you got to really have an understanding of that and marketing as your foundation, or product, like if you're building actual tech product, right? And like I'm not a builder, I don't have a background in computer science, and I just don't see myself kind of going through the lengths that you need to in the next 10 years to attain that knowledge.
Yeah.
But I've been able to help the odd company so far with like what I know in sales, and I just kind of want to continue to double down on that because I've had a really good opportunity for training in past companies, like starting with Robert Half, or coaching and different opportunities that came up in startup environments. Like I actually have this mug right here. You've been sipping your coffee, and I had some this morning, but it says coffee is for closers.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a DMZ mug right there. But that was an accelerator program that we went through with TrueFan, and it was a great opportunity to like have just incredible mentorship. And there's a guy, Mark Ramsey, who definitely somebody you should look up online and maybe find his inbox as well. But he is an unbelievable sales leader, and sort of being able to work with those people along the way. I just felt like if I didn't continue to pursue that learning that I've had all these years now, it would be such a loss, like way too big of an opportunity cost to kind of look back on.
Yeah, that's fair. I kind of agree with that idea. Like sales is such a transferable skill, and it's such a foundation that you can bring to so many different roles. So I definitely latch onto that for sure. Which kind of actually,
everybody's selling every day, right? Like you sell yourself constantly.
Yeah, and I think it's part of sort of wrapping your head around how that's a thing, right?
Yeah, the perspective of it for sure.
Exactly. Cool. Well, that actually segues pretty well into my next question. If you had advice for someone who wants to start getting into sales or something, what would you tell a person in this kind of seat?
Well, first of all, that people hire based on personality much more than they do on the level of experience that you can bring to the table. Like if you're looking to start out in sales, I'm not saying that for like, people who are looking for that account executive role, maybe. And to your point, or what we just talked about, it's such a transferable skill, not only from like doing it and what you're gonna do, but even like a lot of the things that you probably have done. Like, for example, I'm sure a lot of people have had what feel like dead end jobs some of the time, or even just like, you've worked retail jobs or as like a server, or these little things along the way. You may not have always like taken a certain perspective on like, hey, I'm a server in a restaurant, I'm a salesperson. But even if you didn't, that experience is really going to play out like in a sales environment, because you're not going to be afraid of talking to people. Like, especially once you get over that hurdle of maybe calling people super cold, like you'll be totally into that. And above that hurdle, the rest of it just kind of comes down to your ability to articulate stuff well, like improve your communication skills, little things like this that, you and I are still getting better at every single day. But you can be trained, like, I guess like the point that I'm getting at is like personality and a little bit of background and just service, like thinking about how to serve customers effectively is really what you need to bring to sales to be successful. Because, hopefully if you're early in your career, you do get a little bit of like training and resources. And as you move into the next role or the next career spot, hopefully that just continues to grow. Like typically, a B2B sales organization is never going to be successful if they don't really equip their people with resources, big or small. Mm-hmm. And, so, you want to expect those things going in, but you want to have extreme confidence in like who you are and just what you can bring to the table as a person.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of funny. Like I'm now training someone on my team to be, hi Adam, if you're watching this, I'm sure you are. Training him to like kind of recruit SDRs. So he's kind of like an SDR on my team. And it's really interesting. He actually launched a poll last week that was like, what's the best way to measure like a new salesperson's productivity? And I think the leading answer on his poll at this point is probably attitude.
Interesting. Yeah. Not surprising actually, because it's like a big link in that personality traits sector, right? It's like, how do you come to work every day? Like, who are you? Like, I mean, another thing, I hate to say it, but like, not like you have to completely shut your mental on your personal life when you enter the door at work, but like you need to have thick skin in sales naturally. And like an interview is a big example of like, does somebody, even if something personal just happened to somebody and like, God forbid, something super negative, but like if it was a breakup or just like you're having problems in your relationship or something at home, like, and that potentially comes up in an interview, or like you just kind of, you go into that interview just feeling a little bit like not like yourself, like that could be critical in the point of getting hired or not getting hired. And like, that's an example of like, hey, when you're working, can you leave that stuff at the door? You know what I mean? And just come in with like focused on like the task at hand and getting that done for the day. And then like, continue to address that stuff a little bit later on. I don't think people need to completely block it out, but I do think it's a pretty big part of the personality trait, and it links to like your attitude. What side of the bed do you typically wake up on?
Yeah, fair enough.
Because that affects your team members too. If you're part of a team, right, and you bring that like slightly negative morale, sometimes it's not totally based on work, it can just be based on things that are going on. But like, yeah,
it does affect.
Don't want to be bringing down those team members.
And so, actually, that's a good segue. I'm going to skip a question here, but now I'm like, I want to know. I'm like, how do you do that? How do you take a second to make sure you're sort of in check and regulating, I guess, or unwinding and disconnecting properly to kind of come back fresh?
Ooh. I'm still figuring it out, I guess. But you want to try to put boundaries, create those boundaries for yourself. And I mean that on a broad sense of like work and, living, and kind of not blurring that line of like living to work too much, and making sure that like, hey, you're still working to live. Like there's still a life outside of this, even though like, hey, a lot of people can enjoy their work, and a lot of salespeople, like sales professionals, they genuinely love sales. Not all of them do, but like some of them really do. But like that can be, not liking it sometimes might be easier to just like end a day and create that balance or that mixture of like your personal life. Sometimes when you really are enjoying what you're doing, and like I can speak on my own experience, in the early days of building TrueFan, like if there's no boundaries in place, like you work at all times almost. It becomes a constant blur of like what are my normal hours, or what are life hours, and like what is work hours, right? And like for years I almost kind of merged those two into one, and it had some benefits, but ultimately I came out of it pretty burnt out, or a little bit like aware of these habits that I kind of let go, and that turned into like, wow, I'm a workaholic. I'm just like working way too many hours. And the reason that's a big deal is it also takes away from your productivity when you come back to work, not just potentially others around you, but yourself. And so things that I do, I try to meditate. I'm not like super consistent at that, but I do think it helps. And especially if you need a moment while you're working, that can help. Outside, eat healthy, try to stay, I'm not like super fit or like an athlete or anything, but I just try to exercise and get outside, walk, skateboard, have fun. And I think, if you can right now, if you're living alone, try to like hop on some other calls just with like little friends and stuff like that, outside of work hours. So you have that connection that's not just work based, because sales, for the SDRs out there and the BDRs, like can be an exhaustive environment, having to hop on who knows how many calls, your KPIs are set for a day, but make sure you're getting that actual connection from like people who are your peers and your friends or your family, like on a regular basis, so that your connection with humans doesn't just feel like, reaching that point of no's or yes. And like, of course, I feel like right now that could probably just be like demoralizing, right? I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, cool. Well, I saw your DMZ mug there. So are you like slanging the coffee, or like what do you drink?
Mornings, I typically go for a cup of Joe, and I was a drip coffee guy up until like a couple weeks ago. I smashed the carafe or whatever, like the thing that coffee goes into, and so that glass thing broke, and I had just like the Black & Decker one, but I had some Costco gift cards from a phone I bought recently, and I got an espresso machine.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to try to be good about it, like not go too like hardcore bad on the environment by ordering like tons and tons of these pods, but they're recyclables. So like, I don't know. I love a good like latte with oat milk or something like that. Like it sounds fancy, but I don't know. Oat milk.
It's honestly like, it's like all I drink at this point. Oat milk is like so good.
It's unbelievably good. I mean, like I for like a vegan or like a vegetarian type option, I don't eat a ton of meat as it is, because my girlfriend Lena, she prefers not to eat meat, I'd say. But dude, oat milk is just like a lower like kind of fat alternative, I guess, or whatever, than milk too. And like you can just drink tons of that stuff with your coffee. It tastes so good.
It's awesome. I actually, that was a nice segue for me. I went vegetarian a couple of years ago, and so this is why like things like oat milk, I kind of, but all of a sudden once I started having it, I was like, why was I drinking milk?
Yes. I love cheese, and it's gonna be hard to ever stop like having cheese, but oat milk for the win. And coffee for the win. Coffee
fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, cool. And I think that pretty much brings us to like the end of what I wanted to get through as far as all of my questions here. So I guess my next thing that I'll leave us with here is like, what's next for you, Scott? What are you looking at this summer?
Well, let's try to have a game of golf together since I'm back in Ottawa, and you got to believe that at some point this summer we'll be able to play golf in Ottawa, even though Ontario's like we were talking about at one point, the only place in the world or something like that it just isn't allowing you to play golf right now. So try to play a little golf, and we'll get out for a round. Definitely keen to really see what we can accomplish at RightMetric on a work side, and help that team build out, its sales processes, the sales org there, and for myself, get some wins under my belt there. Got a cottage weekend plan that we're doing for the second year in a row now. My mom, my sister, her boyfriend, my girlfriend, and I.
Nice.
So it'll be super fun in August. Yeah, those are kind of, I guess, the things I'm looking forward to. I'm skateboarding a lot as of COVID too. I got back into skateboarding, and so I'm going to skateboard a lot this summer.
Nice. How are your shins looking?
The shins are always a little sore in some spots, but I'm kind of like, I've been going actively enough now that I'm getting less shin dingers, which it feels good. It's like if you can just go have like an hour-long skate and just get out of there feeling like no part of your body is hurting more than when you came in, it's like, it's a win.
That's fair. Yeah. I don't, I'm decent at some board sports, but skateboarding was never a thing. I think I just like ate it on the shin a couple times. I was like, this is bad.
I was never that good as a kid, but I think it's one of those sports. Board sports have long been this way for me. I mean, I've always loved skiing, and like snowboarding kind of fun too. I haven't done as much of it as skiing. There's actually a surfboard just in the background there, but
oh, nice.
I don't really surf that often. I do live in Ottawa for anybody watching, but that's an old relic from my time in Australia. And like, I've always loved board sports, but they're like, each one is just so hard to like get better at than just like, moving essentially.
Yeah.
And so like skateboarding is just always like a bit of a lesson in like, get up, you know what I mean? Like kind of falling, getting up again, and like pushing forward, pushing out of my comfort zone and little things like that, where like, hey, if I'm 28 right now and I'm like yourself, as a kid, I sucked at skateboarding. I could like ollie, and like, do like some basic stuff, but like I couldn't really get anywhere. But if I'm progressing at 28, like, why can't I be progressing when I'm like 45? And it could be running for people. It could be whatever, you know what I mean? Like I see a guy on the canal just doing laps around me, and he's like 70 this year. So I just want to kind of like keep my body moving. So as I get older, I don't lose those parts. And I feel like, whether it's having a kid and going skateboarding with him or her, those moments would be like what you live for, right? Or like that first walk out on the golf course, feeling like you have your full back mobility and you can actually swing the club.
Yeah, exactly. If I start to lose that mobility to swing a club, I'm gonna have a serious talk with myself.
That'll be the time where it's like, okay, I gotta buy like a Fitbit and maybe like that extra treadmill or that bike indoors that I was thinking about.
Right? Awesome. Okay, well, I think that's it for us today. But thank you so much for jumping on with me today, Scott. I'm going to tag Scott in this post. So if you guys want to learn a little more about RightMetric and some of the solutions that they provide, you'll be able to reach out to Scott here. And that's pretty much what we've got.